Welcome to Decoding the Data Ecosystem, a podcast with valuable insights, inspiring stories, and practical advice to guide you on your journey through the world of omics research and how the NIH Common Fund data ecosystem can support that journey. I'm your host, Dr. Allissa Dillman, and I'm the Training and Engagement Director of the CFDE Training Center. My background's in bioinformatics, and I've been working in bioinformatics and data science training and engagement space for almost the past 15 years. I'm really passionate about lowering the barriers of entry for these fields through creative engagement activities such as these podcasts. Now let's get to the show. Hello, today I'm here with Kelli Bursey and Diane Krause. Kelli's area of expertise include qualitative and quantitative research, formative research, and research and evaluation, and Diane specializes in media monitoring, social media listening, landscape analysis, data management, and technical editing. Hello, Kelli and Diane, and welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Kelli, why don't you go first?
Sure. Kelli Bursey, and I've been with ORAU conducting research and evaluation for almost 17 years now. For the Common Fund Data Ecosystem Training Center, I am the lead evaluator. I would say I'm new to the project, having just joined in March, stepping into the role that Dr. DeBrand Tarver previously held. And I want to make sure I give full credit to Dr. Tarver for the incredible work that she was able to do on the landscape analysis, which was able to provide the foundation that and everything we're building on for today. So, Diane?
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm Diane Krause, and I've worked for ORAU for almost 16 years as a health education specialist. So I am new to the training center's evaluation team, working with Kelli. And then earlier this year, I performed an analysis examining the scholarly works associated with CFDE datasets using the Academic Analytics database, which I'm here to talk about.
Thank you so much, and welcome to both of you. So as you mentioned, Diane, we're here today to take a deep dive into the Training Center's landscape analysis efforts. So I'd really love to hear a little bit more about why the Training Center conducted the landscape analysis and the academic analytics study.
So I'll start us off and hand it over to Diane. So whenever you start a new project, it's best practice to kind of understand what's currently being done, or what has been done in that area so you don't reinvent the wheel. So the landscape was conducted to make sure we're able to assess what the current state of training was and mentoring within CFDE. We're looking to identify challenges, gaps, and also any opportunities to improve the training programs within CFDE. So there was a mixed method data collection done with 7 different type of data collections. First, there was a review of the existing CFDE trainings, followed with some key informant interviews with CFDE subject matter experts and learners. Then a literature review was also conducted. There were also 2 surveys, one with CFDE trainers and another with the ORU consortium. It was sent out to identify mentorship areas and best practices and lessons learned there. Then they reviewed some of the data coordinating center information on their website. And then also the academic analytics was conducted, which I'll hand over to Diane to tell a little bit more about.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and talk about academic analytics overall and how we used it. The academic analytics tool provides data about scholars at U.S. academic institutions. We were interested in identifying scholarly works that mentioned CFDE datasets. First, it was important to test if the names of datasets and their abbreviations were bringing up relevant results. So I generated Boolean search queries for each data set and reviewed search results to confirm whether the search queries worked properly. And then I revised the queries as needed. Then what we did was select parameters for the search. And so these included all US academic institutions from public and private sectors, all US regions and states, all fields of study, all faculty types and ranks, and scholarly works since 2004 that included articles, awards, books, book chapters, clinical trials, conference proceedings, and patents. So we downloaded the data about scholarly works for each of the 14 CFDE data sets, compiled these data, and then analyzed the findings.
That sounds like a tremendous amount of work, but I did want to back up real quick for a second. Kelli, you mentioned the OARU consortium, and I was hoping maybe you could just say like a sentence or two about that if for any of our listeners who don't know what that is.
Right. So Oak Ridge Associate Universities has a unique consortium of 160 universities. They are PhD serving universities, so it's an opportunity to collaborate, do research projects, pull into that audience to get information and work together. So they have those universities are part of a consortium which ORU manages.
Thank you for that clarification. So Diane, you'd mentioned all of the data that you pulled from academic analytics. I was curious, so is academic analytics actually the name of the tool itself?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
And
and
the tool we used was the Research Insights tool from the Academic Analytics database.
so this is something that's super new for me. Like, how would one even go about like getting this tool? Is this something that's easily accessible? How did you find out about it?
Good question. Yeah, the ORAU, the people that operate the ORAU consortium here at ORAU, they have a license to academic analytics. So they just provided me a license. That's how I found out about it.
Okay, awesome.
I
So,
will I will
mhm.
add though that many universities have subscriptions to academic analytics because it helps them manage like the publications, track the accomplishments of their researchers.
So if I go out on a limb here, if I was somebody who'd be interested in this, would I probably want to reach out to my academic librarian to see if we have something like this?
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now that we kind of understand a little bit more about like the methodology and the tools used, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more about what the results or the insights were. So CFDE has a wealth of resources, tools, and data. And you know, going back to libraries, if we think about those resources as a vast digital library, I bet it's probably really helpful to know like which books are being checked out the most, who's borrowing the most, and what that information tells us about like what scientists are focusing on right now, and potentially through the lifetime of a program as well. So with that kind of analogy in mind, what's the big picture on the academic engagement results? How many researchers are publishing the CFDE data?
Yeah, so first, the CFDE data set that was mentioned the most over the past 20 years was Genotype Tissue Expression Project, also known as GTEx, and it had close to 2,900 related scholarly works. Related to researchers, almost 2,000 scholars from 195 academic institutions referenced at least one CFDE data set in their scholarly outputs. So that just kind of gives you the broad view. And then drilling down a little bit, the scholar with the most related works was from University of Miami and had 33 works that related to 3 different data sets.
That's super impressive. Did you all notice if there was any sort of relationship between the universities that create the data sets and those that publish with the data sets?
The institutions that hosted the data sets were publishing. We didn't look at correlation specifically for that. So
Okay.
there you go.
And over the past 20 years, which institutions produced the most works related to CFD data sets? And also, what were some of maybe the front runner data sets being used at the moment?
Sure. So our analysis found the three institutions with the most CFDE related works were Harvard University, Vanderbilt University, and Stanford University. And each of these universities had at least 200 related works, and GTEx was the data set they referenced for most all of these works. All three institutions also published on the Human Biomolecular Atlas Program, also known as HubMap. And then you asked about the front-runner data sets being used at the moment. And so if we want to talk about current use, we didn't look at that in our analysis, but one data set stands out from an informal review. Over the past year, the scholars with the most related works were publishing on MotorPack, Molecular Transducers of Physical Activity Consortium. So again, this hasn't been examined rigorously, but it could be seen as an initial finding that could be confirmed with a systematic approach later.
Okay. So I love a good data analysis. Data science is definitely my jam. And, when I am doing an analysis, I always try to think about like what's missing, and I'm very careful to try and not overinterpret my results. So I'm curious about some of the limitations of this type of data analysis and how listeners should interpret the results.
Yeah, that's a great question and topic. So it's important to keep a couple points in mind. First, the data from academic analytics provides a broad overview of publication counts, which is useful, but it has limitations, as you said. It doesn't fully capture how deeply or significantly scholars engage with specific CFDE data sets. Just because a data set is mentioned in the title or abstract doesn't mean it played a central role in the research. So it's important to keep in mind that scholars mentioning a data set doesn't necessarily mean a deep engagement with that data set in the study. Another limitation is that while academic analytics covers many scholarly outputs, it doesn't capture everything. It misses out on scholarly activities disseminated through non-traditional platforms. So the total count of scholarly works may underrepresent the full scope of CFDE related research. Listeners should understand that the data give us a glimpse of the academic engagement with CFDE datasets, but we can't expect that it provides the full picture.
Gotcha. So, how could academic analytics be further utilized to sort of deepen our understanding of academic engagement with CFD datasets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our initial analysis gave a broad view of engagement with CFDE datasets since 2004. Next, we could look at more recent or upcoming years to track additional activity. For example, we could conduct an annual analysis to look for trends in CFDE related works, the scholars who are publishing, and the institutions involved. Analyzing at specific time points could show the data set's growing importance or areas needing more outreach. This analysis could be useful for CFDE's evaluation as it could illustrate changes over time. Another analysis could explore differences in academic engagement by various search parameters. For example, in our analysis, we examined engagement by all institution types in all states. A follow-up analysis could look at different types of institutions or perhaps geographic trends.
I'd certainly be curious. Can you actually look at like tracking trends over time as well, sort of like see which ones sort of peak and then which ones kind of, ebb and flow in publication, like across publication history?
It would be possible on the back end using the downloaded data to do that. It's the data, the way that they're presented, don't lend themselves to that information, I think, in a very direct way, but it could be done indirectly.
Okay. And just for my own clarification, with these analytics, you're looking at, a specific data set. Were there publications that utilized multiple CFDE data sets? Is that possible to look at, or was that already part of the data?
Um, yeah, so we were only focused on one data set at a time.
Gotcha. Would it be possible to kind of see if there's interplay, or would that be difficult
It,
with how the data is structured?
that would be possible just to structure the Boolean queries to pull from those different data sets. Yeah, could absolutely do that.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's still lots of potential and lots of really fun things to play around with.
Yeah, thank you so much for your interest.
So now that we have kind of a broad understanding of who is using CFDE data, let's move on and explore a little bit more on the how. So these are pretty highly technical resources, and understanding how to use them and in what contexts could, I think, certainly be very overwhelming. Right? This is a huge wealth of information and resources. So when looking at the landscape analysis, I'm really curious to know, was there specific barriers that, learners might face when trying to understand and use CFDE tools and data?
Yes, Alyssa. So when conducting the survey, there were some barriers, specific barriers identified by learners and trainers. And I think it's twofold if you think about it the way it was reported out. So one relates to CFDE and its data itself, right? Learners felt overwhelmed and mentioned their struggles when it was the initial steps of how to use the data. Um, because you have to navigate through various websites and all these different access requirements once you figure out the data that you're looking for. So that was one of the issues. It was just all over the place. They felt it was kind of not organized and easy, streamlined to find the data. But then once they were able to locate the data, get their access requirements down, it was hard to understand how the data is structured because they could be structured differently, as well as like the different type of qualities of data. And they also mentioned the different types of metadata that were available. Like nothing kind of lends itself to like a basic commonality across the data sets. So those were some of the things out of the survey that jumped out from the analysis.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point of, when you've got, more than, 15, 14, 15 different projects and programs and data in all of these different locations, it can certainly be really overwhelming on, where to even get started. And I think one of the things we're excited about in the training center is, to really become this hub for training and to be able to sort of bring a centralized place for learning. So we're currently building out a learning management system, which will be sort of hopefully that centralized place where people can find what they need, easily filter and search for their training, and be able to kind of figure out where they want to go from there, and then, potentially jump to the different programmatic pages. So I know that the analysis also emphasized modular self-paced learning with a lot of interactivity. Why do you think this is important, and how does it help with adoption?
So a lot of the trainers were saying that it's essential that it has some type of hands-on activity, um, because it lends itself to the engagement of using the data, right? Coding, data science, bioinformatics. It's nice to sit there and teach somebody to walk through a database or learn a skill, but that actual application lends itself to be able to have the learner actually apply it and learn it, and how to use it in the intricacies of how to learn that skill themselves. And then being able to have it self-paced, that allows for the the learner to be able to go at their own pace, right? So if they need to stop, everybody's life is busy, they have a lot going on, but it allows them to have that flexibility to do it at their will and availability. And some of the hands-on things that they did mention, I wanted to make sure I included that. Things like the hackathons, where they are basically trying to break something, learn a skill, walk through some data, and things of the sort, was helpful. Case studies, because you can make up some a theoretical scenario, but to apply it to real life situations and applications was something that was advantageous to trainers and learners. And then also those small group collaborations, when there's a team of 2 to 3 people, to be able to get with somebody and work out some situations. One person might know a little bit more than another or have a different type of skill. So you're learning in a group setting as well and being able to apply it. That's all helpful for it to stick for the learner.
Yeah, that's really insightful. And I also want to add, I think that, across all of these different resources and data types, there are certainly some skills that really do cut across all of them that kind of keep popping out over and over again. And in those cases, it really does make a lot of sense to have these, modularized, self-paced learning activities. That way, each program doesn't have to kind of keep reiterating on these same skills that are really shared across programs and projects. Um, and it also means that, the trainers can then spend more of their time on like their specific things that are unique to their projects and programs. The specific skills that are, really needed to tap into that particular data type or that particular scientific question. So still kind of thinking about, training and how one approaches training in different ways. How do you see hybrid learning and onboarding evolving within the CFDE ecosystem?
I see it being kind of a requirement, or necessary, in order for the training center to stay innovative and with the times of different trainers and learners, because you can offer live sessions, um, and then people can join at particular times based on their availability, but also having those asynchronous synchronous type of learning opportunities allows that accommodation, for those trainers that need to they can't make a live, or they need some other type of availability to do the training as well, kind of self-paced. And it allows us to expand the various different target audiences and types of audiences, because everybody doesn't learn the same way. um, and having that flexibility will allow more people to learn about CFDE and train on the data sets as well.
Yeah, as a trainer myself, I would say having a lot of different modes of learning certainly reaches more audience. And just as you said, Kelly, like having different styles of learning, really helps folks find the methods that they are most comfortable learning in. And also, like, depending on your learning journey, You may need more of a hands-on, technical, slow walkthrough, or you might be really excited to just listen to, a podcast where a bunch of people are really geeking out about like a specific topic that you are, interested in doing a deep dive in. So sort of having all of these different modalities means that you can kind of reach, different audiences at their different places in their learning journeys. So that brings me to actually, so you certainly at some point kind of hit as much as you can do on your own, and having mentorship can be really helpful. So I know that mentorship also came up really strongly in the landscape analysis, and I'm really curious to hear what you think the ideal mentorship model might look like for CFDE.
Oh, definitely. So, as you said, mentorship was the landscape analysis definitely confirmed that having mentoring programs significantly improves the excuse me, learning outcomes in fields, bioinformatics in particular for this one, data science type stuff. Um, I think learning about, our mentoring program, like I said, I just came into this, so learning about it as we go, and it was so unique to me, and it stood out, and it lends itself um, to having different participants to learn and grow during the program. The model that we have to have a faculty member, PI, paired with a student, but it doesn't stop there. And involving another mentor with the support from a DCC to make it like a whole well-rounded team and like group collaboration and support. I think that was cool to me to have a different element of it, not just a one-on-one, but also the ability to be able to pull from another expertise, mentorship. So then maybe the mentor has some questions or is not, an expert in a particular area, but could pull from advice and support from another mentor as well within the DCC. So I just thought that was a very unique approach, innovative into mentorship. So I'm excited to see how the model pans out during our mentorship program.
Thanks, Kelly. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're going to be running our summer pilot for our collaboratory, the mentorship program that we're working on, and um, as you said, Kelly, so we are going to have members from the DCCs, so those are the data coordinating centers. So these are folks who really have a deep understanding of the data itself, so the structures of the data, how the data is in these platforms, what kind of metadata is associated, so they're really going to be people with deep technical expertise, and then partnering them with a PI student team means that both the student gets to learn a lot more about how to apply these things to their own research, and gets to sort of just learn more about all the wealth of resources that CFDE has. But it also means that the PI gets to have that real deep understanding of what's possible with the data that they're going to use for the summer, and also potentially how they might be able to integrate some of these data and tools into any coursework that they're teaching, or other students that may not end up as part of our initial summer program. So having this really interesting way of setting up the program will hopefully give it more wider reaching impacts. So I do want to talk just sort of, now that we've kind of talked about the academic analytics and we've also talked about the landscape analysis, I'd be curious to kind of hear how you think we can best utilize both of these types of analysis in guiding the future of CFDE Training Center and our offerings.
Diane, I don't know if you wanted to start or you want me to start, Diane.
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, so as far as the landscape analysis itself, we answered some very specific train questions about training needs and gaps, best practices, and lessons learned for both the training and the mentoring programs. Um, and then identify those areas for improvement as well, so we can making sure we're developing effective training programs. So now I think it's time we just kind of look at those recommendations what we've already started doing and is using them to establish the training programs and resources, allowing those researchers to use CFDE data effectively, right? So we're working on that mentorship program and having those access to those resources and trying to have that central hub, which the whole training system is supposed to be, or training center is supposed to be. So really taking that time to take the data and actually implement those recommendations.
And I would just add for the academic analytics, you know, overall, we could be looking at where people are publishing, with respect to what we found before. As I mentioned previously, GTEx was the front runner data set over the past 20 years, but is that going to stay a trend over the next few years? And so we can be using the academic analytics data to be assessing, if people are publishing about the same databases at the same level over time. So, we could conduct an annual analysis, as I mentioned before, to identify gaps in publishing, and then from there we could provide outreach on data sets that are getting less engagement.
So Kelly, I have just like a curious follow-up question for you. So we've done all of this evaluation. We have a plan. We are sort of building components that we think are going to help, sort of fit the findings or the recommendations. How do so from your point of view as an evaluator, like how do we know if what we're doing is working and maybe what we need to pivot with?
Sure. Um, so I failed to mention one of the other recommendations would be to have evaluation methods kind of like a standardized way to address and evaluate these trainings and the efforts that we are doing. So having standardized pre and post test questions for trainings, including those quizzes and coding exercises, and just like a long time follow-up survey to make sure we're understanding the impacts of the training on participants, right? So like they could take a training, they do an evaluation, and they did good in that moment. But being able to try to follow up with those participants and assess their application, if they're using it future use, like did this training really do something for you in your life as a learner and your career? So just really trying to have like a training effectiveness using evaluations throughout all the trainings, trying to be streamlined there. And also it wouldn't hurt to do more surveys again, in another year or so, to see now the mentors or how the mentorship program went. So we will be doing evaluation through that to identify the impacts of that pilot, and then also doing another training survey once we get these trainings up and running, and just the training center and overall, how do people feel about it? Are we reaching that goal of being this centralized hub? And what are some things that people like or we can improve on and maybe even doing it on a yearly basis to be able to make sure that we're meeting those needs and any gaps that learners might need for the training center.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about different kinds of data and things like that, and we've mentioned lots of things that the training center is currently doing Bear in mind, however, the training center is quite new, but I would really love to sort of just mention or ask what you think, how can listeners, whether they're educators or mentors or researchers, how can they get involved or at least benefit from the CFDE training resources that we're all building?
So one of the easiest ways to get involved, and kudos to our own Dr. Allissa Dillman, podcast. You can listen into the Decoding the Data Ecosystem podcast, which are available on most platforms. Um, get some really good information there, even if it's just listening and hearing about the information, awareness of our resources, is always a good place to start. And then Allissa, I'll let you expand more on all the events coming up. I'm not as versed on those, but opportunities to engage with CFDE in the training center.
Sure. So we're definitely going to, conferences and talking about what we do. So we were just recently at the BioIT conference and actually ran a hackathon there. So that's certainly a very good way to engage with us, and hopefully we'll be doing more of those. Our next event that we'll be at is actually at the ISMB conference in Liverpool this year. So I'll be there, so come by, find me, say hi. I'm really excited to talk about all the really cool stuff that we have going on. Obviously, you can always reach out to us via email. Hopefully our website will be up soon. And stay tuned for our learning management system, where I mentioned, we're going to have a whole bunch of training materials there and also be we'll have knowledge assessments and all sorts of fun things there. So stay tuned for that. I'd really like to thank our guests today. So thank you, Kelli and Diane. But I thought maybe it would be fun to end with sort of a question about was there anything that jumped out at you as just being like an interesting tidbit or something you were surprised about CFDE in like as a whole, right? So for both you, Kelli and Diane, like this is kind of new for you. So I'm curious, did anything kind of just jump out to you? Not like necessarily with the landscape itself, but just like CFDE as a whole. You're like, oh, I didn't expect that, or oh, this is really interesting, or oh, if I were doing research, this would be cool to poke around in. Kelli?
Ah, that's funny. Yes, I was all over the place trying to learn about it. One of the most interesting things, helping present the poster at the spring meeting, and somebody asked, did you look at CFDE data or CF data? And I was like, there's a difference. So I think that's not explained very much, that like the common fund and the common fund data ecosystem are different things, or it's a part of something. So that blew my mind. And just the ecosystem thing within itself, I think the word ecosystem means it's a lot of pieces and parts, and it's a lot of different components, and that's exactly what this is. So many different types of pieces that make up the CFDE, and just trying to learn the like nooks and crannies and all the data sets and pieces, the sensors, the players, the stakeholders. Um, it's just a wealth of knowledge in a like ecosystem, and just excited about being able to leverage all those opportunities and expertise, um, to like complement the training center, and just glad to be a part of it as a training center, to be a part of the ecosystem, and excited to see what this will look like eventually when it's all said and done.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kelli. How about you, Diane?
Yeah, I think, speaking to what Kelli was mentioning with lots of pieces and entities being involved, I've in just doing the searches and looking at the kind of publications that have arisen out of these various data sets, it just it's been interesting to see, where people are publishing and related to these data sets and the kind of topics that they're addressing. So I think that's been fascinating for me. And then also in, we got a interested response to the academic analytics work at the spring meeting. So I was delightfully surprised that, people found that context important for their understanding of CFDE.
I I'm totally not surprised because I think it just is it's so like data heavy, and I think it's just very like, anybody who deals with data, whether it's biological data or not, we're always really excited to hear about how those things apply to things like outside of our immediate field. So like for me especially, like I deal with bioinformatics data, but it was super cool to see how, those techniques can be applied to like publication and like networks and nodes at a publication. And it was just really cool to kind of see similar kinds of visualization, but with a completely different type of data. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm guessing that maybe that's why some other folks were excited about it too. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so again, thank you so much, Kelly and Diane. I hope this was kind of a helpful whirlwind tour of the work that we're doing in the CFDE Training Center, and hear from everyone next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Decoding the Data Ecosystem, a CFDE Training Center podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes in this series. Find out more information about CFDE data and tools that may be valuable to your research by visiting our website.